Well, hello all my YouTube friends, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about my most recent makes as a Fabric Mart fabricista, and I'm also going to give you some tips on how to sew with Crinkle Rayon challis fabric. So stay tuned and you'll learn more about tips on how to work with fabric and also my most recent fabric makes. For those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I am a Fabric Mart fabricista, which is basically an ambassador. They sponsor me fabrics, and then I in turn write a blog post and talk about the fabrics and also the pattern selection that I have chosen for that particular month. So for this month, I decided to go with the Concord Tee by Cashmerette Patterns, as well as the Brumby Skirt by Megan Nielsen Patterns. And both of these patterns are really great. They're for advanced beginners. And I decided to go with this beautiful red crimson floral fabric, and so that's the fabric that you see that I'm wearing here in the video. Now the top is a bonus piece, and I'll talk more about the top later on, but the patterns that I have used to make, actually I made two tops, and so the patterns that I've used to make these two tops, I will give you more detail on those patterns in a later video. So let me talk about the skirt first, and then I'll talk about the Concord Tee. So for the skirt, I chose this beautiful red, like I said, red and white floral fabric, and it's a Crinkle challis crepe fabric. Now, for those of you who know me and have been following me, you know crepe fabrics aren't one of my favorite fabrics to work with, but in the description on the listing of this fabric, it said that it had a soft hand. So normally if it says something like soft hand or smooth texture or anything like that, it's going to be the smooth kind of crepe, and those crepes I can actually handle, and I am fine with those crepes in terms of having them against my skin. So I knew that this was going to possibly be a crepe that I would be okay with. So that's why I chose this crepe fabric, and the description was right. It does have a soft hand. You don't really feel a whole lot of texture on the surface of the fabric. It's very fluid and drapey. It drapes really nice. The drawback to this fabric being as though it is a crepe challis crinkle fabric, it shifts a lot. And so that's where my recommendations and things like that and my tips on working with crepe fabrics will come from. I'm not new to working with these fabrics. However, I don't work with them very often. I have researched in the past how to handle these fabrics and how to care for these fabrics, because you will need to do certain things if you want to come out with a really great garment that's even and symmetrical, and that does not, that the fabric pieces have not shifted on you while you were working with them. So again, stay tuned to the end and I'll give you some tips on how to work with these types of fabrics. The pattern, the Brumby Skirt by Megan Nielsen, is a beautiful pattern. It has 3 different variations of a skirt. You can make, there's views A, B, and C. So I chose to make view C, which is the knee length skirt that has gathers in the waistline and a waistband. It's very simple and easy. You don't have that many pattern pieces. As I stated before, it's designed for advanced beginners, and the pattern just sews up really well. It's very true to size. Actually, I selected a size for the test. I just tested the waistband piece. I did not sew the entire dress or anything like that. I just tested the waistband piece to see if it would fit around my waist. And for the size 16, it was a little bit too big. And I think the finished measurements are measuring around a 33 and a half for the waist. And so I just graded in between the 14 and the 16 because I am more on the 31, 32 side. And so, but the waistband for the 14, I believe, is a 30. And so I graded in between the two so that I can get the size that I want. So it's a really nice fit on my waist, as you can tell. I'll pop the pictures here so you can see what it looks like. And I am really enjoying this pattern. Because it's such an advanced beginner pattern and it's just so easy, there are no real like drawbacks to this pattern. It's just a simple skirt that, you know, it's been drafted really well, and it's a beautiful skirt. The pattern has these oversized pockets that are really large and really beautiful. And I'll pop the image here so you can see what those art lines look like. They are so big. I did not expect the pattern pieces to be that big. So if you do want to purchase this pattern and you want to make this pattern, I want to make sure that I caution you and help you understand that you will need quite a bit of fabric for the pockets. I would say anywhere between maybe a half a yard just for the two pocket pieces, because they are really big and large, and you need to cut 2 pieces out for your lining and 2 pieces out for your facing or for your pocket. So it's a really big pattern in terms of that. And so that's one of the reasons why I didn't select that piece. I had the fabric on hand. However, I was working with a shifty fabric as well. And so not only did I not want to use that much fabric for my pockets, but I also didn't want to I did not want to take the chance that the fabric would shift on me while I was sewing the pocket, and it will distort the seam lines of the skirt, the side. And so I did not want to risk any of that. So I decided to omit the pockets because the fabric was shifting so much. And I didn't do the pockets at all. So again, I just did the very simple version. It's a very well drafted skirt. The pattern calls for, so there's different variations. Like I said, for view A, you can use more structured material like your corduroy, your twills, your denim. And then for views B and C, they call for your more drapier fabrics like your rayon, your crepes, your silky fabrics, those types of fabrics, those fabrics that really flow and drape really nicely, so that you can get that real nice fluid drape when you're walking or whatever. So that's the reason why I selected that view as well, is because I wanted to have a more fluid drapey skirt. The skirt turned out really well overall. I did have to do a couple of things to stabilize the skirt while I was sewing it. The fabric shifted a lot, so I didn't want to run the risk of having a distorted waistband. I had to cut the waistband out 3 times with my rotary cutter, not scissors, because again, the fabric shifted. And then on top of that, I also had to stabilize the lining of the waistband with interfacing, with a lightweight interfacing, so that it didn't shift. And I also decided not to stitch in the ditch as well, because I did not want to pull and tug on that waistband. Even though I had already stabilized it, I still did not want to pull on it. So I just serged the ends of the waistband, and then I tacked it in place at the side seams, and whatever seams that were along the line of the skirt, I just tacked the waistband in place that way. And I'll try to put a video here so you can see what that looks like as well. The other issue that I had is that the fabric bled in the wash. I purchased 2 yards of this fabric, and then I was given 2 yards of this fabric for my blog post. So for 2 yards of the fabric I actually used for the skirt, and the other 2 yards was intended to make a dress. However, after it bled in the wash, I decided to use the fabric for mock-up purposes, and that's why I have these 2 tops. They were not intended to go with the skirt as a matching set, but I decided to test and mock up some patterns that I had on my sewing list this month. And so that's why I got these two tops. They look really great together, but like I said, the fabric bled in the wash, and I'm a little bit nervous that the fabric is still not quite like I need to go through another rinse cycle, or maybe 2 more rinse cycles before the fabric is completely, the dye is no longer releasing out in the washing machine. So I did have that issue, and I was a little bit sad when I saw that it bled in the wash. I did take special care, and I washed the fabric as the care instructions instructed, but it still bled in the wash. So I'm still a little bit sad about that. So that's, like I said, the only issue that I had is the fabric was just not as stable, and then also the fabric bled in the wash. So now I want to talk about the Concord Tee. So I selected a black rayon fabric. It's just it's just a regular black rayon fabric. It's not anything, you know, elaborate, but it is a beautiful piece. I love the richness of this particular fabric. It's really dark and it's nice. It was really great to work with. And as I stated before, I chose the Cashmerette Concord Tee for this. I did not, going into the project, I didn't really make any adjustments. I just selected the size based on what the sizes that I usually choose for Cashmerette patterns, because they usually work well for me. Now the Concord Tee, this is not a new pattern. However, they did release a new size range for this pattern. So if you are not familiar with Cashmerette Patterns, it is a company that is geared towards plus size women and plus size sewing patterns. However, they have just recently this year, they re-released certain patterns with smaller size ranges, and the Concord Tee is one of those patterns. I actually ordered the size 0, I think it is size 0 to 16 or something like that. And so I selected that particular pattern range, and I went with the largest size, which is the size 16, because it was supposed to fit my bust measurements more accurately, and it somewhat does, but I do need to grade in between the 14 and the 16 for the bust, and maybe grade down to a size 12 for the waist. For the first garment that you're seeing here, which is of the black rayon knit, I actually chose a size 16 for the bust and a size 14 for the waist. I have since then changed the pattern, and I'm working on a new garment, and I guess I'll report back to you and tell you how that particular one fits. But the black rayon knit project, that actually, it turned out well, like I said, but it's a little bit loose fitting. It's very long in the torso area, so I would need to shorten it by 1.5 inches. And then also the armhole is very long on me, and so I also, like I said, that size 14 would probably be better than the size 16, just because the armhole is too long. There is some drag lines on the side of the breast area, and that is basically because the armhole is too long. It's not because I need a full bust adjustment or anything like that. It's because that armhole is just way too long, and I need to take some of that fabric in. Other than those things, the pattern is a really great pattern. I just selected the wrong size for this particular project, but it sews up really easily, and I really love the fit, but I do need to make those adjustments so that I can get a better fit. So with all that said, I really enjoyed this particular project, the Brumby Skirt as well as the Concord Tee. I'm hoping to remake these soon. Actually, I already remade the Brumby Skirt out of a fall fabric, and so you'll see that soon as well. And I made a matching set out of that. So the Brumby Skirt, and then also the pattern that I use to test this this fabric with. So I'm really excited about upcoming plans and what I'm going to be doing with those patterns. So with all of that said, let's get into the part of the video where I share with you tips on how to work with crinkle, challis, rayon type fabrics. So the first thing that you want to do when you're working with rayon fabrics, you always want to wash your fabrics. This is very important, and make sure you wash your fabric based on the care instructions. Normally, you want to go ahead and wash your fabric the way in which you will wash your fabric after your garment is done. However, most rayons shrink a lot, and so you want to make sure that you get that shrinkage out. And so if your fabric can stand warmer temperatures, I would recommend washing your fabric in warmer temperatures, because that will increase your chances of having your fabric shrink, and you will know exactly what you need to work with when you go in to cut your pattern pieces and all of that, and you won't have to worry about shrinkage later on. In terms of drying, you just, again, when you take your fabric out of the wash, if your care instructions say tumble dry low, do that. If it says air dry, do that. Try to follow the care instructions. And then after that point, the second thing that I would encourage you to do is to iron your fabric. Crinkle crepe fabrics, they wrinkle a lot. And so if you take your fabric out of your dryer and then you go to lay it down and cut your fabric without ironing your fabric, you will run the risk of making inaccurate cuts. So when you press your fabric, and this pretty much goes for any fabric, when you press your fabric and when you get those wrinkles out, you reduce your chances of making inaccurate cuts. And so that's what you want to do to make sure that you get the right cuts and you get the right size that your garment will fit you. The third thing that I would encourage you to do is to use some kind of heavy duty spray starch. Spray starch is going to help reduce the likelihood of your fabric shifting and moving as you're cutting and sewing with it. So if you can, really pack on that spray starch and then iron your fabric as you're packing on that spray starch, it will help to stiffen that fabric. And then again, when you go to cut that fabric or when you go to sew with that fabric, your fabric won't move and shift as much. The fourth thing that you should probably be doing when you are working with crepe fabrics is using a cutting table. So don't cut on the floor if you can help it, or on your bed or things of that nature. Use a hard surface like a table, because this is going to help you again get those accurate cuts, and you'll be able to, your fabric will be on a stable surface, a hard stable surface. And so when you're pushing down into your fabric and you're making those cuts, your fabric will be less likely to shift and move. But if it's on the bed or on the floor, your chances are it's going to shift and it's going to move. The fifth thing that I would encourage you to do is use lots of pins or some type of pattern weights or anything like that. When you're using tons and tons of pins, your fabric has a less likelihood of shifting and moving as well. And then also those pattern weights, any type of pattern weights or any type of paper weight or anything that you can use to hold that fabric down in place while you're cutting it is going to be really good in getting you results that where your fabric will be actually, you will cut your fabric out exactly as the pattern is laid out, and you won't have any additional cuts, or you won't be left with a shorter end on your corners or something like that. The last tip that I want to share with you is use new needles. This should be true of any project that you are working with, but especially when you are working with lightweight fabrics, and then also any type of rayon or crinkle type fabrics, because they will run the risk of snagging if you don't use new needles. I don't know if you are aware of this or not, but when you have a dull needle, it does rip into your fabric each time it goes down and puncture a hole into your fabric. It will run the risk of ripping your fabric if it's very dull. So just make sure that you change your needles out so that you don't get any snags or anything like that. And also make sure that you use the right needle. So use new needles and make sure you use the needle that is designed for the fabric weight and the fabric type that you are working with. So those are the tips that I want to share today on how to work with crinkle, challis, crepe-like fabrics. And I hope that that information was helpful for you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hit the notification bell to receive notifications of all my videos when I post them. All right, everyone, so that does it for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in today and lending me your time and your support. I hope you all have a happy and blessed sewing week. And until next time, stay creative. Bye.